In the quiet moments between public appearances and royal duties, when cameras are tucked away and protocols fade into whispers, the most profound gestures often unfold. Sometimes, a single object can carry the weight of centuries, bridge the gap between past and present, and transform a relationship forever.
What happens when a king, moved by genuine affection and respect, decides to break with tradition and bestow upon his daughter-in-law something that has never left the royal vaults? What happens when that gift carries with it not just monetary value, but the very essence of royal history itself?
This is the story of how one unexpected moment changed everything Catherine thought she knew about her place in the royal family, and how King Charles III proved that sometimes the most powerful crown jewels are not the ones worn in public, but the ones given in private, from the heart of one royal to another. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Windsor Castle, casting long golden rays across the Persian rugs that had witnessed centuries of royal conversations. Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked slowly through the corridors she had come to know so well over the past 13 years. Her heels clicked softly against the ancient stones, a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat in these hallowed halls. She was heading to meet King Charles III in his private study, a room she had visited countless times before, yet today felt different somehow. There was something in the way he had requested her presence, not through his private secretary or one of the usual royal protocols, but personally, with a warmth in his voice that suggested this was more than just another family discussion about upcoming engagements or royal duties. As she approached the heavy oak door, Catherine reflected on how much her relationship with her father-in-law had evolved over the years. In the early days, when she was still adjusting to life within the royal family, their interactions had been polite but somewhat formal. Charles had been kind, certainly, but there had been an invisible barrier between them, the natural distance that comes with royal protocol and the weight of centuries-old traditions. The transformation had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first. It began with small gestures during family gatherings, moments when Charles would seek out her opinion on matters concerning the children, or when he would share stories about William's childhood that only a grandfather would think to tell. Over time, those moments had multiplied, creating a bond that transcended the formal relationship between a monarch and his daughter-in-law. Catherine knocked gently on the door and heard Charles's familiar voice inviting her in. As she entered, she found him not seated behind his imposing desk as she had expected, but standing near the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back in that characteristic pose she had observed so many times during public appearances. Today, however, there was something different about his posture, a certain anticipation that made her curious. "Catherine, my dear," Charles said, turning to greet her with that warm smile that had become increasingly frequent in their private interactions. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." She settled into one of the comfortable armchairs near the fireplace, the same chairs where they had shared numerous conversations about the children's education, royal responsibilities, and occasionally, more personal matters. The room itself seemed to embrace their conversation, with its walls lined with books, family photographs, and paintings that told the story of British monarchy through the ages. "I hope everything is well with the family," Catherine said, settling into the familiar rhythm of their conversations.
"William mentioned you had been working late into the evening lately." Charles chuckled softly, a sound that had become more frequent as his reign had settled into its natural rhythm. "Always concerned about others, aren't you?"
"That's precisely one of the qualities I wanted to discuss with you today, though perhaps discuss isn't quite the right word." Catherine tilted her head slightly, intrigued by the mysterious tone in his voice.
Over the years, she had learned to read the subtle changes in Charles's demeanor, and today there was something distinctly different about him. There was an energy, an excitement, that seemed barely contained beneath his naturally composed exterior.
"Your Majesty?" she prompted gently, using the formal address even in this private setting, as had become their custom. "Catherine," Charles began, moving to sit in the chair opposite her. "I have been thinking a great deal lately about legacy, about the things we pass down from one generation to the next."
Not just the obvious inheritances, the titles and properties and responsibilities, but the more personal legacies, the gestures that speak to the heart rather than to duty. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, which was unusual for a man who had spent his entire life in the public eye and was accustomed to speaking with precision and clarity on any topic. "When I think about your journey within our family, I am struck by how naturally you have embraced not just the responsibilities of your role, but the spirit of service that defines us. You have brought something special to our family, something that goes beyond what any protocol or tradition could have required. Catherine felt a warmth spreading through her chest at his words. Compliments from Charles were not uncommon, but there was something in his tone today that suggested these were not mere pleasantries or polite observations. "You have been an extraordinary mother to George, Charlotte, and Louis," he continued. "But more than that, you have helped them understand what it means to be royal while never letting them forget what it means to be human. You have supported William through the challenges of preparing for his future role, but you have also carved out your own path of service that is uniquely yours." Catherine felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, moved by the sincerity in his words. "Your Majesty, that means more to me than you could possibly know." "And that," Charles said, rising from his chair with a sudden energy, "is exactly why I've made a decision that some might consider unconventional but which feels absolutely right to me." He walked to his desk and Catherine noticed for the first time a small, ornate wooden box sitting atop a stack of papers.
The box itself was clearly old, its wood polished to a rich patina that spoke of age and careful maintenance.
There were intricate carvings along its edges, patterns that seemed to tell a story of their own. "This box," Charles said, lifting it carefully with both hands, "has been in our family for longer than most people could imagine. It has sat in the royal vaults, carefully maintained and occasionally admired, but never used for its intended purpose. It has been waiting, I believe, for the right moment and the right person." Catherine watched as he returned to his seat, the box now resting on his knees. She could see that his hands were trembling slightly, not with nervousness, but with emotion. This was clearly a moment he had been planning for some time, and the weight of whatever decision he had made was evident in every line of his face. "May I ask what's in the box?" Catherine said softly, her own curiosity now thoroughly aroused. Charles smiled, an expression that seemed to light up his entire face. "Something that belonged to someone who would have adored you, someone who would have seen in you exactly what I see, exactly what our entire family sees." He opened the box slowly, and Catherine caught her breath as she saw what lay nestled within the silk-lined interior. It was a necklace, but not just any necklace. Even in the soft light of the study, the sapphires caught and reflected the light in a way that spoke of exceptional quality and craftsmanship. The centerpiece was a large sapphire surrounded by diamonds, with smaller sapphires and diamonds creating an intricate pattern that seemed to flow like water around the wearer's neck. "This," Charles said, his voice thick with emotion, "belonged to Queen Victoria. It was commissioned for her by Prince Albert in 1847, and she wore it on only the most special occasions. It has not been worn since her death in 1901. It has been preserved, studied, admired from afar, but never worn." Catherine stared at the necklace, hardly able to process what she was seeing. Queen Victoria's personal jewelry was legendary, pieces that existed more in the realm of museum artifacts than anything that might actually be worn by a living person. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Your Majesty, this is priceless. This belongs in the royal collection, in the Tower of London, or in a museum where people can appreciate its historical significance." Charles leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that surprised her. "Catherine, there are thousands of pieces in the royal collection that serve as museum pieces, as symbols of our history and heritage. But Victoria didn't commission this necklace to be looked at through glass cases. She commissioned it to be worn, to be loved, to be part of a living legacy." He lifted the necklace from the box, and Catherine could see the full beauty of the piece as it caught the light. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, each diamond and sapphire set with a precision that spoke of the finest jewelers of the Victorian era. "Queen Victoria," Charles continued, "was a woman who understood that the monarchy must evolve while respecting its traditions. She was a devoted wife and mother who never let her royal duties overshadow her humanity. When I look at you, Catherine, I see those same qualities. I see someone who honors our traditions while helping to shape our future." Catherine felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. "Your Majesty, I am deeply honored, but I cannot accept something so valuable, so historically significant. What if something happened to it? What if I lost it, or damaged it?" Charles set the necklace back in the box and reached across to take her hands in his. "My dear Catherine, do you really think I would entrust something this precious to someone I didn't have complete faith in?" "Do you think I would make this gesture lightly?" The question hung in the air between them, and Catherine realized that this was about much more than a piece of jewelry, no matter how beautiful or historically significant. This was Charles's way of telling her exactly how he saw her place in the family, exactly how much he trusted and valued her. But the other members of the family, Catherine protested weakly. Surely there are others who would have a greater claim to such a piece. Charles smiled, shaking his head gently. I have given this considerable thought, Catherine. I have discussed it with the necessary people, and the decision is mine to make. This necklace needs to be worn by someone who embodies the values it represents, someone who will honor its legacy while creating new memories with it. He paused, looking at her with an expression that was both serious and deeply affectionate. I want you to have this because you represent the future of our monarchy in the best possible way. You have shown grace under pressure, dignity in difficult circumstances, and above all, you have shown that it is possible to be thoroughly modern while respecting our most cherished traditions. Catherine felt the tears that had been threatening finally begin to fall. The magnitude of the gesture, the trust it represented, the faith in her that it demonstrated, all combined to create an emotion so powerful she could barely speak.
Your Majesty, she whispered, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it, Charles replied simply. Say you'll wear it knowing that Queen Victoria would have approved, knowing that you have earned your place not just in our family but in the long line of remarkable women who have helped to define what British royalty can be at its finest.
Catherine looked down at the necklace, still hardly able to believe what was happening. The sapphires seemed to glow with their own inner light, and she could almost imagine Queen Victoria herself wearing this very piece, feeling its weight around her neck as she carried out her royal duties with the same sense of purpose that Catherine had tried to bring to her own role. I accept, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I accept with all the humility and gratitude I can express, and I promise you that I will wear it with the honor and respect it deserves. Charles's face broke into a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire room. Then let us see how it looks on its new owner. As he lifted the necklace from the box once again, Catherine realized that this moment would forever change her understanding of her place in the royal family. This was not just a gift but a declaration of faith, a statement of belonging that went beyond anything she had ever dared to hope for. The weight of Queen Victoria's necklace around her neck was unlike anything Catherine had ever experienced. As Charles carefully fastened the clasp behind her neck, she could feel the cool touch of the sapphires against her skin, each stone seeming to carry with it the whispers of history. She moved to the antique mirror that hung near the window, and for a moment she couldn't recognize her own reflection. The woman staring back at her looked regal, in a way that transcended any formal training or protocol lessons she had ever received. The deep blue of the sapphires brought out the color in her eyes while the diamonds caught the light and seemed to create a constellation around her throat. But more than the visual impact, there was something else. Something she couldn't quite name but could definitely feel. How does it feel? Charles asked, standing behind her as they both gazed at her reflection. Catherine touched the centerpiece gently with her fingertips, still hardly believing it was real. It feels like I'm carrying history, she said honestly. Like I'm connected to every woman who has ever worn the crown jewels, every queen who has understood the weight of responsibility that comes with loving this country. Charles nodded, clearly moved by her response. That's exactly what Victoria would have wanted to hear. She believed that jewelry wasn't just decoration, but a way of connecting with the legacy of service that defines our family. As Catherine continued to study her reflection, Charles moved to his desk and retrieved a leather-bound photo album she hadn't noticed before. I thought you might like to see some photographs of Victoria wearing this very necklace, he said, opening the album to a page marked with a silk ribbon. The photographs were remarkable, showing Queen Victoria at various stages of her life, the necklace prominently displayed in several formal portraits. In one image she wore it to a state dinner, the sapphires complementing the deep blue of her gown. In another, taken later in her reign, the necklace adorned her neck as she posed with several of her grandchildren, including the future King Edward VII. She wore it to some of the most significant events of her reign, Charles explained, turning the pages slowly. The opening of the Great Exhibition in 1851, the wedding of her daughter Princess Victoria, and several state visits that helped shape Britain's relationships with other European powers. Catherine studied each photograph intently, trying to imagine the stories behind each occasion. It must have seen so many important moments in British history. Indeed, Charles agreed, but what struck me most as I was preparing to give this to you was not just the grand occasions, but this one. He pointed to a smaller, more intimate photograph tucked between the formal portraits. It showed Victoria in a simple day dress, the necklace her only jewelry, as she sat in what appeared to be a garden with several small children around her. The image was candid, unofficial, showing a grandmother spending time with her family rather than a monarch fulfilling her duties. She wore it for family occasions too, Catherine observed, surprised by this revelation. Exactly.
Victoria understood that the most important legacy a royal can leave is not the grand gestures or the state occasions, but the way they love their family, the way they pass on values and traditions to the next generation.
This necklace represents both sides of royal life, the public service and the private devotion. Catherine felt a new understanding settling over her as she studied the photograph.
This wasn't just about receiving a beautiful piece of jewelry, but about accepting a role in the continuing story of the British royal family. She was being entrusted not just with a valuable object, but with the responsibility of carrying forward the values it represented. "Your Majesty," she said, turning back to face Charles, "I want you to know that I understand what this means." "This isn't just about the necklace itself, is it?" Charles smiled, clearly pleased by her perception. "You always were perceptive, Catherine." "No, this isn't just about the necklace, though it is a magnificent piece. This is about recognizing that you have earned your place in our family in a way that goes beyond marriage or protocol. You have shown yourself to be someone who can be trusted with our most precious legacies." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Charles called out permission to enter, and William stepped into the room. Catherine watched as his expression changed from casual curiosity to complete astonishment as he took in the sight of her wearing Queen Victoria's necklace. "Good heavens," William said, stopping short in the doorway. "Catherine, is that Queen Victoria's sapphire necklace?" Charles confirmed with evident satisfaction. "I thought it was time it had a proper home again." William approached slowly, clearly as overwhelmed as Catherine had been by the significance of the moment. "Father, this is extraordinary. I had no idea you were planning something like this." "I wanted it to be a surprise," Charles explained. "Your wife has more than earned the right to wear our family's most treasured pieces, and I thought this particular necklace suited her perfectly." Catherine watched as William studied the necklace, seeing in his expression the same awe she had felt when she first laid eyes on it. "It's incredible," he said finally. "Catherine, you look absolutely stunning. But more than that, you look like you were born to wear it."
The comment brought fresh tears to Catherine's eyes, because she realized that this was exactly what Charles had been trying to tell her. This wasn't about her being given something she didn't deserve, but about recognizing something that had always been true but perhaps never fully acknowledged.
"There's something else I want to share with both of you," Charles said, returning to his desk and retrieving a document from one of the drawers. "I've had this drawn up by the royal jewelers and the palace historians. It's a complete provenance of the necklace, documenting every time it has been worn and by whom." He handed the document to Catherine, who saw that it was beautifully illustrated with photographs and detailed descriptions of each recorded wearing of the necklace. The final entry, dated that very day, read, "Presented to Catherine, Princess of Wales by His Majesty King Charles III, in recognition of her exceptional service to the Crown and her embodiment of the values that define the British royal family. This will become part of the official royal collection records," Charles explained. "Future generations will know that this necklace was worn not just by Queen Victoria, but by the woman who helped guide the monarchy through the challenges of the 21st century." Catherine felt the full weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders, but rather than feeling burdened by it, she felt empowered. This was Charles's way of telling her that her contributions to the family were being recognized not just in the present moment but for posterity. "There's one more thing," Charles said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I want you both to understand that this is not just a personal gift, but a decision about the future of our family. Catherine, when the time comes for you to wear the crown, you will do so knowing that you have already proven yourself worthy of our most precious legacies." The reference to her future role as queen consort hung in the air, a reminder of the path that lay ahead for all of them.
Catherine had always known that this day would come, but Charles's gesture seemed to transform it from a distant inevitability into something more immediate and real. William took his wife's hand, squeezing it gently.
"I couldn't agree more with my father's decision. Catherine, you've brought honor to our family every single day since you became part of it, and this necklace is exactly where it belongs."
Thank you.
The three of them stood in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts about what this moment represented. Catherine found herself thinking about the future, about the occasions when she might wear the necklace, about the photographs that would someday be added to the album Charles had shown her.
"I have a confession to make," Charles said suddenly, breaking the silence with a slightly mischievous smile. "I've been planning this for months. I've been working with the royal jewelers to have the necklace cleaned and restored, making sure it was in perfect condition for its new owner." Catherine laughed, wiping away the tears that had continued to flow throughout their conversation.
You've been planning this for months and I had no idea? I'm quite good at keeping secrets when necessary, Charles replied with evident satisfaction. Though I must admit there were several moments when I nearly spoiled the surprise.
You have no idea how difficult it was to contain my excitement during our family dinners. William shook his head in amazement. I can't believe you managed to keep this from all of us. This explains why you've been so mysterious about your meetings with the palace historians.
They were incredibly helpful in researching the complete history of the piece, Charles explained. I wanted to be able to tell Catherine everything about its significance, every detail of its story.
A gift like this deserves to come with its complete heritage. Catherine looked down at the necklace again, still marveling at its beauty and the craftsmanship that had created it more than a century and a half ago. I keep thinking about Queen Victoria wearing this to spend time with her grandchildren. There's something so touching about that, the idea that she chose to wear something so formal and magnificent for such intimate family moments.
That's exactly why I knew this necklace was meant for you, Charles said. You understand that being royal isn't about choosing between the formal and the personal, but about bringing dignity and grace to both.
You've shown that in everything you do, from the most important state occasions to the simplest family moments. As the afternoon light began to shift in the study, casting longer shadows across the room, Catherine realized that this conversation would remain one of the most important of her life, not just because of the incredible gift she had received, but because of what it represented about her relationship with Charles and her place in the royal family. I promise you both, she said, looking first at Charles and then at William, that I will wear this necklace with all the dignity and respect it deserves. And someday, when the time comes, I will pass it on to someone who embodies the same values, someone who understands that being royal is about service, about family, and about carrying forward the best of our traditions while embracing the future. Charles nodded approvingly. That's exactly what I hoped you would say. And that's exactly why this necklace has found its perfect home.
3 months had passed since that transformative afternoon in Charles's study, and the sapphire necklace had already begun to weave itself into the fabric of Catherine's life in ways she had never anticipated. The first time she wore it publicly was to a state dinner honoring the President of France, and the reaction had been immediate and overwhelming.
Fashion magazines called it the most significant royal jewelry moment in decades, while historians praised Charles's decision to bring the piece out of storage and into active use. But it was the private moments that had truly shown Catherine the deeper significance of Charles's gift. She had worn it to George's school play, where her 10-year-old son had whispered to her afterward that she looked like a real princess from a storybook. She had chosen it for Charlotte's birthday dinner, watching as her daughter's eyes had grown wide with wonder at the sapphires. Each time she fastened the clasp around her neck, Catherine felt a connection not just to Queen Victoria, but to the long line of women who had understood that true royalty came from the heart, not from the crown. This morning, however, was different. Today marked Charles's first anniversary as king, and the palace had planned a series of events to commemorate the milestone. Catherine stood in her dressing room at Kensington Palace, the necklace laid out carefully on the velvet-lined tray her lady's maid had prepared. Beside it lay the rest of her jewelry for the day, but nothing could compare to the magnificence of Victoria's sapphires. As she lifted the necklace to fasten it around her neck, Catherine reflected on how much had changed in the past year, not just for Charles as he settled into his reign, but for their entire family dynamic. The gift of the necklace had marked a turning point in her relationship with her father-in-law, transforming what had always been warm respect into something deeper and more meaningful. William entered the dressing room, already dressed in his formal uniform for the day's ceremonies. He paused when he saw Catherine adjusting the necklace, the same look of wonder crossing his face that she had seen that first day in Charles's study. "I don't think I'll ever get used to seeing you wear that," he said, moving behind her to help with the clasp. "Every time I see it, I'm reminded of how perfectly my father chose." Catherine smiled at his reflection in the mirror. "I keep remembering the expression on his face when he opened the box. He was so nervous, so excited. I don't think I had ever seen him quite like that before. He told me later that he had been planning it for over a year," William revealed, surprising Catherine.
"He said he knew from the moment he decided to give it to you that it was the right decision, but he wanted to wait for the perfect moment."
The revelation touched Catherine deeply. The idea that Charles had been thinking about this gesture for so long, planning and preparing to make it as meaningful as possible, spoke to the depth of his feelings about her place in the family. "Speaking of my father," William continued, checking his watch, "we should head downstairs. He specifically asked that we meet him in the blue drawing room before the ceremonies begin. He said he had something he wanted to discuss with us. Catherine felt a flutter of curiosity as they made their way through the palace corridors. Over the past few months, these private family meetings had become more frequent, as Charles had begun to include them more fully in his decision-making processes.
It was another sign of the evolving nature of their relationships, the way he was gradually preparing them for their future roles while valuing their input in the present. They found Charles waiting in the blue drawing room, but he was not alone.
Standing with him was Princess Anne, his sister, who had always been known for her straightforward manner and her deep commitment to royal duty. Catherine had developed a strong relationship with Anne over the years, appreciating her no-nonsense approach and her genuine warmth toward the family.
"Ah, there you are," Charles said as they entered. "Catherine, that necklace looks even more magnificent than I remembered. I think Queen Victoria would be delighted to see it worn with such grace." Princess Anne turned to greet them, and Catherine was surprised to see an expression of deep emotion on her usually composed face.
"Catherine, I must tell you how moved I was when Charles told me about his gift to you. It was exactly the right decision, and seeing you wear it today brings back so many memories of our grandmother." The comment caught Catherine off guard. She had known that Princess Anne had been close to the Queen Mother, but she hadn't realized the connection to Queen Victoria's jewelry went beyond the historical significance.
"I hope you don't mind that I shared the story with Anne," Charles said, seeming to sense Catherine's surprise. "But I wanted her to be here today because what I'm about to tell you involves our entire family's future." Catherine and William exchanged glances, both intrigued by the serious tone in Charles's voice. Whatever he wanted to discuss was clearly significant beyond the usual family matters they typically addressed in these meetings. Charles moved to stand near the window, where the morning light caught the details of his formal dress uniform. "As we mark the first anniversary of my accession, I have been thinking a great deal about the legacy I want to leave, not just as a monarch, but as the head of our family. The decision to give Catherine Victoria's necklace was part of a larger vision I have for how we move forward as an institution."
He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I have decided to establish what I am calling the Victoria Legacy Collection, a selection of the most significant pieces from the royal jewelry collection that will be designated specifically for the use of future queens and princesses who have demonstrated exceptional commitment to the values our family represents."
Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat. The implications of what Charles was describing were enormous, both for her personally and for the royal family as an institution.
"The necklace you're wearing today, Catherine, will be the centerpiece of this collection," Charles continued. "But it will be joined by several other pieces that have similar historical significance and emotional resonance.
The goal is to ensure that these treasures are not just preserved, but actively used by women who understand their true value." Princess Anne stepped forward, clearly moved by her brother's vision. What Charles is proposing represents a fundamental shift in how we think about the royal collection. Instead of treating these pieces as museum artifacts, he wants to return them to their original purpose as jewelry meant to be worn and loved.
William was the first to find his voice. "Father, this is extraordinary.
The precedent you're setting, the message you're sending about the role of women in our family, it's exactly what the monarchy needs as we move into the future." Catherine remained silent, still processing the magnitude of what Charles was proposing. She understood that this was about much more than jewelry, that he was using these tangible objects to make a statement about values, about continuity, and about the kind of monarchy he envisioned for the 21st century. "Catherine," Charles said, turning to address her directly, "I want you to know that this decision isn't just about recognizing what you have already contributed to our family, though that contribution has been extraordinary. This is about investing in our future, about ensuring that the women who will guide our monarchy in the years to come understand the weight and the privilege of their roles." Catherine finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Your Majesty, I am overwhelmed by your confidence in me, by your vision for our family. I promise you that I will do everything in my power to be worthy of this trust." "You already have," Princess Anne said firmly. "Catherine, watching you over these past 13 years, seeing how you have balanced your public duties with your role as a mother, how you have brought your own unique perspective to royal service while respecting our traditions, it has been truly inspiring." The praise from Princess Anne, known for her high standards and her reluctance to offer empty compliments, meant more to Catherine than she could express. She felt tears beginning to form in her eyes as the full impact of the moment settled over her. "There's something else," Charles said, moving to his briefcase and retrieving a leather portfolio. "I have commissioned a complete photographic record of the Victoria Legacy Collection. with historical notes about each piece and documentation of their significance. I want this to become a resource for future generations so they understand not just what they are wearing, but why these pieces matter. He handed the portfolio to Catherine, who opened it to find page after page of stunning photographs and detailed historical information. The collection included tiaras, necklaces, brooches, and earrings, each piece more magnificent than the last, each carrying its own story of royal history and family tradition.
This is incredible, Catherine breathed, turning through the pages slowly. The research that must have gone into this, the detail, it's like holding a piece of living history.
That's exactly what it is, Charles confirmed.
And that's exactly why I knew it belonged with you. You understand that these pieces are not just beautiful objects, but connections to the women who wore them before. Links in a chain of service and dedication that stretches back centuries. As Catherine continued to study the portfolio, she came across a page that took her breath away. It was a photograph of Queen Victoria wearing the very necklace Catherine had around her neck, but the image had been paired with a photograph of Catherine from the state dinner 3 months ago. The resemblance in their expressions, in the dignity with which they both wore the piece, was striking. "You did this on purpose," Catherine said, looking up at Charles with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. "You wanted me to see the connection, to understand that this isn't just about inheriting something from the past, but about carrying it forward into the future." Charles smiled, clearly pleased that she had grasped the deeper meaning of his gesture. "The moment I saw that photograph of you at the state dinner, I knew I had made the right choice. You didn't just wear Victoria's necklace, Catherine. You honored it. You brought it to life in a way that connected past and present perfectly." The morning light streaming through the windows seemed to catch the sapphires in Catherine's necklace, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the walls of the blue drawing room. As she sat surrounded by her family, holding the portfolio that documented her new role as the guardian of these precious legacies, Catherine felt a profound sense of purpose settling over her. "I want you all to know," she said, looking at each of them in turn, "that I don't take this responsibility lightly. These pieces represent not just the history of our family, but the hopes and dreams of the people who have looked to the monarchy for stability and inspiration. I will wear them with pride, but more importantly, I will wear them with the understanding that they represent a sacred trust." Princess Anne nodded approvingly. That's exactly the attitude that convinced Charles he had made the right choice. You understand that true royalty is not about the privileges or the beautiful things, but about the responsibility to serve something greater than yourself. As the family began to prepare for the public ceremonies that would mark Charles's first anniversary as king, Catherine took one last look at her reflection in the room's ornate mirror. The woman looking back at her was someone she had never imagined she would become when she first fell in love with William all those years ago. But she was also someone she was proud to be, someone who had earned her place through dedication, service, and an unwavering commitment to the values that defined the best of the British royal tradition. The sapphires around her neck caught the light one more time, and Catherine smiled, knowing that Queen Victoria would indeed approve of the woman who now wore her treasured necklace. The gift that had begun as a gesture of affection and recognition had become something much more profound. A symbol of continuity, of faith in the future, and of the enduring power of family bonds that transcend time and tradition.
As they prepared to step out into the public eye, Catherine understood that she was no longer just wearing a necklace, but carrying forward a legacy that would continue long after she was gone, passed down to future generations of women who would understand, as she now did, that the greatest privilege of royalty was not the crown itself, but the opportunity to serve with dignity, grace, and love.